Yeah, these things, I think we maybe thought about them at the beginning, and then it was really came to ring true and still is. One is generally that you get out of this what you put into it. And the more work we've put in either in the business analysis up front or in being very responsive to follow-up questions and working together, the better things have gone. We've had to be transparent with some of our limitations internally, what we're able to do and what we've needed to.
Sarah, I think you may have cut out there.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. So we can hear you.
I don't know if you missed any of that, but basically you get out of it what you put into it. And with one heavy decision, for example, was where to store data, and we could have done a better job solving that up front. I think it delayed us a little bit. So definitely being very responsive and not being afraid to get together and solve these problems is certainly paid off where we did that instead of delaying decisions or kind of saying that we would figure it out later. Agile works. It's really great to be in the production environment and getting user feedback and also having the developer available for support. I would definitely say that was a lesson that rang true. And just that, it's been several years that we've been working on this and we know there are more to go. So having kind of the long view has been very, very helpful.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think we've learned a lot from this process as well. The big one, we already know this, but it's always worth reiterating that the business experts, the people who are actually the most familiar with their workflows and with their needs, are really critical. They need to be involved kind of from the beginning, which I think correlates with Sarah's finding about being willing to fully engage. I think sometimes there's a temptation to, either sort of let internal sort of IT folks handle some of the discussions, or kind of higher level kind of administrators, but really it is critical to have the perspective of people who are very familiar with what needs to happen. They're going to know a lot more of the details about sort of just little restrictions and little rules and things that would make their jobs easier. And it's really great to have them buy in as well. Another lesson that we learned was that we need to be willing to make really big adjustments. This is an agile process, but it's also, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, it is a government contract where there is some expectation that you're laying out what you're going to do ahead of time. I think that's true for most contracts, but that sometimes you need to change the plan. To bring in something earlier that seemed like you could wait, but it's become critical. Or in the case of forest management, we had something that we were going to work on for them this phase that they realized, internally there wasn't as strong a need for it as there was for another piece of functionality. So we swapped that out. And that can be, I think, kind of scary. There's a lot of considerations for everyone, but it can also be really helpful to make those changes and help support what the biggest needs are rather than what sort of everyone thought the biggest needs were going to be. And then lastly, I think this was a big lesson for me coming from, previously I worked in change management in city government. And so I tend to take that lens that I'm always like, oh, but this could be better, this could be better. But that sometimes you really do have to just meet people where they are. That especially when you have a big group of users who kind of already know the existing system, you don't want to change it too much, even if you think, well, that doesn't really make sense. That there are some people who are really excited about change, and working with them to improve what can be improved is really critical, but also sort of providing stepping stones from an existing process to a new process so that nobody feels like they've just had the rug pulled out from under them. And right, most people want to just sort of keep doing what they've been doing with incremental improvements. So that's been a lesson for me as well.
Great. And so I'd like to open it up for question and answers. I do have one that's in queue. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask either Sarah or Emma, please feel free to either use the Q&A option on the screen, or you can also use chat, whichever is easiest, so I can monitor both. But one question that came in was, what about their existing data? How do you handle that? How do you work that in? How do you I'm assuming, how's the import handled?
Yeah, so obviously there is an existing TLMS system that has 15 years worth of data in it, and nobody wants to lose that. And so we've actually built sort of the process of creating new interfaces around the existing data and making sure that we can support bringing it over. There have been some times where the data model is really different. Either because there's a limitation in the old data model, or the process has just changed enough in 15 years that sort of the initial version wasn't really serving people's needs. So for the most part, all of the sort of legacy data is in the new system and can be edited and worked with. There are a few cases where we had to say, okay, we can bring it over, but it's view only now, because it's different enough that we can't continue to edit it in the same way. So I think it's a balance depending on sort of what existing data there is, but that's something that I think Sitka has a lot of experience with. Most people do want to hold on to their data and be able to report on it. And similarly, I think we haven't had to leverage this too much, but one of the features of this application is that it has sort of a separate reporting environment where there are views of the data that could be, right now, since we have been able to bring over all the legacy data, they're mostly reading from the new database, but they could be reading from both. So if there is data that couldn't be migrated, you could still access it in one place. So that's kind of one of the core guiding principles, is that you should always have access to your data.
While we field the next question, I am going to just transfer over to the contact information. Sarah and Emma's information is here. If you would like to reach out directly to either, I'm sure they're welcome to
Absolutely.
take any emails or questions that way. Also, if you are interested in learning more about the platform or wish to schedule a personal demo, you feel free to contact me. My contact information is there as well, and I can connect you either directly with Montana or Emma as appropriate for that. We did have a question about if other states were, if basically the person is asking if their state was interested in leveraging a similar system, how does that get handled?
So I think that is
basically with the licensing. I think so. So I'll kind of field that one quickly. So if you are interested in looking into that, there's a lot, definitely we can, feel free to reach out to me at damon.knight@sitkatech.com, and I will make sure that your request gets directed either directly to Montana, who holds the license, and they're the owner of the system. But I do know that they're open to, leveraging it so other organizations and state agencies can benefit from their investment. I do have another question, but thank you for asking that. I do have another question here, is how does it work if the data changes or needs to change? Do changes need to be made to the application to work with the changes? Work if the data changes, or if the data, so basically, how does it work if what has been input in the system needs to change?
Okay, so we're talking about like data corrections?
Maybe, yeah, or data quality, maybe.
Data quality?
Yeah.
So we do have a lot of sort of interfaces for making corrections. I might just jump over here and find out. I think the most sort of like locked down data is definitely the I'm going to sign as a site admin who can do lots of powerful things. So one of the, I think, really critical pieces of any platform is sort of your roles and permissions. I didn't get into that in too much detail, but there are definitely tiers, people who can only read, people who only have limited permissions, people who have all permissions within a certain area. So I'm logged in as the site admin who can do absolutely everything, and that is a role that at Montana DNRC is really only held by a few people in IT who aren't actually using the system, and they just have it for sort of testing and troubleshooting. Let's look at a receipt. So one of the things that came up a lot was, okay, how do we do a receipt correction, right? Because maybe you've already sent the money somewhere, maybe you know, you've already been working with this data and now you need to change it. So there are a lot of rules around sort of who can do what. So if I am, there's sort of two versions here. If I were a cashier, sort of a lower level user, I would only be able to come in here and edit the target, so sort of what invoice or agreement is supposed to be going toward. A couple of the other fields in here, comment, that are a little less dangerous. And then only a few people with sort of higher level access can actually come in and change payment amounts, and change things like, you know, which sort of business unit it belongs to and that sort of thing. So there's definitely different levels of data editing and data correction ability depending on permission levels. And we haven't really addressed a need for like a bulk update necessarily in here. That's something that I think DNRC is still handling with sort of a change request to their IT division, and they would do that. But in general, we try to make sure that any changes that need to happen are happening through the front end where there are validation rules that are going to prevent you from doing something like, you know, changing the amount of a receipt to be, you know, less than the amount of money that's already been allocated and sent out to the trusts, for instance. So I hope that answered some of that question at least.
And if not, well, I do think you did a great job. So, but if it didn't get to your the exact question, feel free to follow up with us. We can, like I said, we're open to do a one-on-one demo and also answer any additional questions that may have. At this point, I think I just have one question left in queue. If there is anybody else, I think we still have time, so feel free to pose it. But one is there a limit to the number of users that can access a system, or how is that handled?
Yeah, no limit to the number of users. I mean, in terms of, this question might be coming from, right, so a lot of sort of software as a service, there's a number of seats that you can have. You know, I think since Montana holds the license here, that's not a concern. If there were some sort of cloud hosting involved, there would probably be tiers in terms of data size, but that's something that would sort of have to be worked out on a case-by-case basis. But there's definitely no limit to the number of users, and we've tried to set up the roles and permissions such that as many people as want to come in here can at least come in and view the data, even if they don't have sort of write access.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, with that, I don't have any more questions in queue, but again, thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time to do today's webcast and share all the great work that you are doing in Montana with forest lands. And Emma, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule as well to share your work with the group here. So thank you so much.